Hi. Can you hear me? I have no idea where I'm supposed to stand, so hopefully you can hear me from here. And I'm going to keep looking up here, even though it's right in front of me, so I apologise for that now. Yeah, so there's like a lovely picture of me, basically. I'm a web developer, front-end web developer, so I do JavaScript, HTML, CSS, all that stuff all day. Recently started a job at Bazaar Boys, and I've been doing accessibility in my last couple of places. It's something that I really just sort of got passionate about accidentally, really. But I got really into it, and I realised how essential it is. So now I'm just trying to persuade all of you to get really into it as well. Yeah, so I'll start off with what is accessibility actually about. Basically, it's just thinking about all of your users. There's a real problem and a real habit for pretty much anyone who makes any product, whether it's a website or software or even non-software, that you make it for you. Like, it's a problem that everyone's heard of. You know, there's all this, like, the examples of the crash test dummies that were made for men, and then they were dangerous for women and children. There's the smartwatches that didn't work for women because they didn't track the same things that women cared about compared to men. So it's just thinking about stuff like that. Specifically what I'm going to talk about, because it's what I do, is in web development and front-end web development. There are some guidelines, as you can sort of see up there. There's an organisation that comes together, and basically what they just do is work out what's essential at different levels, and work out different levels of standards that companies can try to adhere to. So then you can say on your website or on your service, we meet this standard, and people will know what to expect and whether they can reasonably expect to be able to use your website. So yes, as I said, there's a lot of aspects of accessibility. I mean, the common one that pretty much all of us hit nowadays is like mobile and device users. So obviously, used to be websites, pretty much the expectation was you were sitting in front of your 800 by 600 CRT, browsing, you know, really exciting geosites, you know, GeoCities websites and all this. But everyone uses totally different. Like, probably half the people in this room have completely different resolutions of screens, different phones with different user interfaces and everything else. And then the main part of accessibility that I sort of tend to work on is the people with both temporary and permanent impairments. So permanent impairments is the ones that you would normally think of, people who are blind users or deaf users, or they have dexterity issues, things like that. But there's also people that have a temporary thing. So the alphabet of accessibility issues, it is linked at the end, and I'm going to like people be able to get the resources off me after. But it basically runs through examples, and it's things that you might not even think of, like somebody plays rugby on the weekend and gets a concussion. Suddenly, you know, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but for a day or two they might just not be able to focus the same, and they might struggle if they're using your website, and there's loads of stuff moving all over the place. Or more permanent sort of concentration issues, like loads of the websites do that thing now where when you're scrolling, there's like a thing that moves along the top or moves down the side and jumps all over the place. But if you have a concentration issue like ADHD or like a concussion or something, that can be really distracting, and it can make you lose your place every like paragraph every time you scroll. So things like that. What does it affect? So there's a quick list here, but I will be going through these in a bit more detail. Basically, both design and build is my point here. There's a lot of things in terms of your designing before you even get to building your product, but then there's a lot of things that when you're building it that you need to think of. You can't wait until you've built it and then go, oh, we'll come back and do that, but I will cover that as well later. Yeah, why does it matter? So partly the legal requirements, which is the bit that I always point out to the business company people that are like, I just don't see why we need to focus on this, we just need to get the product out. It's like there are legal requirements. A lot of us probably work for American companies or work with American clients or with EU clients and EU companies. They both have legal requirements to fulfill a certain standard for their users. I mean, there's different levels to which this applies to different companies. If you're a government website, obviously you have to hit much higher requirements than others. There's like famous examples like Target in America once got sued, I think it was like $6 billion because they didn't have like descriptions on their images and things like that. MIT had a lawsuit brought against them for not providing transcripts with some of their lessons that they put online for people to use. So it's things like that where people sort of think, oh, but it's not really important. But even if they don't think that their users hit it, for a business perspective, you don't want to wait until somebody comes and says, actually, your site wasn't accessible. You want to cover it beforehand, because $6 billion is not a nice way to find out that your site wasn't quite as accessible as you thought. And yeah, these are some statistics from a 2016-2017 government survey in the UK. So that there are 13.9 million people in the UK that report at least one type of disability. 27% of those report dexterity-related impairments. So that's things like MS or Parkinson's, or things where you maybe have like a tremor in your hand or struggle to hold the device, things like that. There's examples of people where you think, okay, I have my phone and it's a really nice app and I've got this, but stuff maybe moves about or everything's really close together. If you've got a tremor in your hand and you're moving your finger quite often, if everything's really close together, you're going to hit the wrong thing more often than not. So it's, as I say, it's just to drive home the point that it's not just, everyone goes, well, I covered blind people, because you can tab through my website and that's it, I'm done, I've covered everything. But there's a lot more aspects to it. From the demographic side, like 8% of children reported in the survey were disabled. 45% of adults over state pension age, and that, especially that last number, is just going to keep going up. There are more and more people that are going to have these accessibility issues because, tech just is getting more and more popular, and more and more people are going to be involved and are going to be finding out that actually these issues are really impacting what they do every day. So it's just about improving the experience for everybody. It's about making sure that everybody gets what you want. Like if you're building a site or a product or a service or just an advertisement for something that you do, the last thing you want is to say, oh, well, I have this target market and I've probably covered like 70% of them, so that's probably fine. Obviously you want to hit 100% of your target market. The last thing you want to do is leave out this big chunk of people just because you kind of forgot that they would experience it slightly differently. So what do we need to do? Device considerations. This is, as I said, one of the big ones in terms of, everyone's used to it, everyone knows the frustration of you try and go onto a website on your phone, but you realise I haven't updated it since 2006, so nothing works and everything's super tiny and you can't find anything. Or that thing where if you're on holiday or you're away in the countryside somewhere and you're like, I'm going to just visit this website, but no one's ever tested it on a phone or on a bad connection or anything else. So it takes 3 hours to get that one image for the header and you still haven't actually got the content that you wanted. As I mentioned here, it's there's a lot of people that are sitting in an office with super fast, brilliant Wi-Fi speeds and super fast computers and going, my website's perfect, I can't see any single problem with it, everything works perfectly for me. And then you find that there's somebody that's sitting out in the middle of Donegal or somewhere, who knows where, sitting with terrible 3G connection, going, I just needed to find out the address of this thing or whatever else, and I have no idea now what it is. There are a lot of ways to get around this. There are a lot of strategies that we can use, using sensible sizes of images, bringing down a reasonable image based on what device somebody's using, service records and things like that, which are sort of coming up now, the things you'll see where you can sort of install a website on your phone and cache all that data, save all the pages of that website to your phone. So if it's something that you use often and you know that the content's in there, but say there was a website for today, you don't know if you're going to have data for the day. You want to be able to download that all, so if you're in this building, you can still access everything. So things like that, making sure those are in your website ahead of time for people. Fonts. This is I've tried to be reasonably sensible with my font. I think it's readable enough, but just shout at me afterwards if anyone's finding it really hard. But it's one of the big things with this is that thing where I think probably most of us have seen it, where you go onto a website and it's just blank for 10 seconds before any of the font comes in because they're using loads of really fancy fonts and it takes ages. Or the thing that drives me really crazy is that really trendy thing where the whole first page before you scroll is a massive picture and really, really thin white font that you can't see on half the image because it's all really pale. So things like that, just thinking about that. Also, icon fonts is one of my pet peeves, and a lot of accessibility people, you will notice, all complain about this because they're really annoying. Partly because, as I mentioned there, dyslexia friendly fonts are a really big thing. They're basically a font that is bottom weighted, so it makes it a lot easier for people with dyslexia to tell letters apart. If they use that in their browser, then all your icon fonts are going to fall apart. Like GitHub and things like that, when you have little icons, they just become squares everywhere. If you're on Facebook and you see those little share buttons and all, squares, they can't tell what's going on. So try and use things like SVGs or proper images when you can, because it just means that you're not just throwing away a bunch of people who are left with gobbledygook on the screen going, I have no idea what any of this is supposed to be. And colours. So you can sort of see there, the little diagram in the corner is basically, the top left one is normal sort of colour vision, and the other three are the three most common types of colour blindness. Colour blindness is actually really common, particularly in the UK, for some reason, but it's just like one of the biggest things is every website seems to use, it's default, the same as you see on traffic lights and everything else. Green is good, red is bad. And you just think, obviously that's fine. Green is good, red is bad. But if you can see on the top right and bottom left there, the red and green are the very top and very bottom ones, and they're practically identical. So if I move on to this next one to show you this particular GIF, see if that's green, and it just goes green, but then say if that was going red when it went wrong, and that was the only indication that it went wrong, like half of your users who are colourblind might have no idea what's going on. It's still a bar, it's still full, so I don't understand why my pictures suddenly didn't show up because the bar filled the whole way, so doesn't that mean it worked? So you need to consider having, I'll go back to this because I can go back and cover that, but you need to have some other aspect. You need to have an icon or some text or some sort of secondary way of highlighting what things mean. It's the same as if you've got a paragraph and you're like, oh, well, we made all the links a different colour so people will be able to tell, or we made the working buttons different from the broken buttons or whatever else. If it's just colour that you're relying on, there's going to be some people that just have no idea that there's a difference there. And also, as I mentioned there, high contrast mode is a really big thing for people that have poor eyesight. You'll sometimes see people with it, so it's like, especially when they use Windows, it's quite common, it'll be like a black screen and all the text and the buttons will be a white, so they're going to lose all the colour anyway because their computer's overriding that. So colour is good, as you can see from my slides. I am a fan of bright colours and things, but just make sure that it's not an essential information giving point, that you have some sort of backup way of providing whatever information you're giving. And with this, for notifications as well, make sure that people know that something has happened. You can see those things there, they complete, once they upload, the things go along. If someone's using a screen reader, just showing that and then leaving it sitting there full doesn't mean anything, and they're not going to have any idea. So you need to have some sort of text and possibly some sort of notification or alert. There are ways that you can mark sections of a page to say, this has been updated, there's been a change over here, so people with screen readers and things like that will know to go back and check. Rich media, well, I think this is a fairly common one that most of us know about, which is basically just having like captions and all those sort of options, just so that people know what's going on. It seems fairly common. And yeah, the GIFs thing, there's a lot of discussion, if anyone's been on Slack before, about super fast and super bright like GIFs and animations. They just destroy some people's heads, and it just makes it really hard to pay attention to things, so just be aware of that. There's some more technical stuff here that I'm not going to go into because I realised that I'm running out of time already. So keyboard navigation is a fairly common one. That's the one that most people think about whenever you think accessibility. They go, oh, I have to do keyboard navigation. But the important thing with this is that you have to make it very clear like where your keyboard is, because just saying, well, if I've tested it and I know my website and I know that if I hit the right key for often enough, I'll get everywhere. But that's not the way that a user hits your site, because a user doesn't know your site already when they hit it the first time. So you have to make sure things like, is everything in order? If I hit tab, am I going to go like 1, 2, instead of 1, 2, 3, am I going to go 1, 3, 2 because you used fancy CSS to change the order of everything afterwards? Is it going to be clear where they are focused on? If they're trying to navigate through a form, can they see where they're about to start typing? And one of the big pain points is don't change your user's focus. If your user's focused on something, do not magically use some JavaScript to suddenly make them focused on something else, because all you're going to do is irritate them and they're going to give up and go away because they just can't be bothered trying to constantly, a lot of people, certainly I've even experienced that. If I'm trying to do something and then a pop-up comes up of like, please don't leave our site yet, and you're like, well, I wasn't going to, but now you've moved my thing over here and I was in the middle of typing and half my words gone, and it's just irritating. And yeah, these are the more sort of things that are specific to web development. So things like document structure, it's making sure that if you have a heading, it's marked as a heading and not just another bundle of the text on the screen. Same with forms and things like that. It just allows people with screen readers to be able to jump to certain things or to know the importance of things, because you can't rely on them being able to see, oh, well, that's obviously a header because it's big. That doesn't mean anything because the screen reader doesn't say bigger text, smaller text. So they need to know what the elements are that they're looking at. Same with buttons and all the obvious stuff like that. Voice navigation. So I think this is a one that people are fairly familiar with, because a lot of us use like OK Google or Siri or whatever, Alexa, whatever else in our houses now. But actually, there's a lot of people that use this to interact with almost everything on a daily basis. Their phones, their computers, everything. So it's just, it's less common now to build this into your site, because we do have these services that can do this for us and help us navigate around the web. But it's just making sure, again, that your website is built in a sensible way so that people who use things like Dragon, which is a voice navigation tool, the tool needs to be able to figure out what's on the page. It needs to be able to pull out like your headings so that that user can then say them and get to the right places. And building accessible components, as I said, this does not just mean keep hitting tab until you get to every part of the website, because that's just not how people who use screen readers will use your website. They have their own tools, they have their own things. If you've ever seen someone or heard someone using a screen reader, they listen to them super fast, like super fast. You will not be able to listen along if you haven't heard it before. So you need to be able to build things in such a way where they can immediately pick out and recognise certain parts and jump to certain parts. Like they don't want to go through, here's a description of the 17 images before I hit the sign up form. If they've been there before, they just want to be able to jump to that form. And ARIA rules. So this is again a particularly web development thing, but that's basically about making sure that you mark what something is. If it's a button, say it's a button. If it's a sort of side bit of text or a caption under an image, say that, because they might be able to go, oh, I'm jumping past that image. It's important to remember that not everyone who uses a screen reader is 100% blind. So there might be people that they can sort of see a bit of an image, but so they don't maybe need the caption, or they're just not interested and they're trying to move past it. Things like that. So yeah, will this give us loads more work? It's my panic face whenever I mention accessibility, whenever people are doing web projects and they do that, they're like, no. Not necessarily, basically. If you think about it from the start, as I said before, all of these things are about how you build and design your website. So if you make a whole thing or a whole service, a whole product, and then you come back after, it's like, oh yeah, we need to sort of glue some stuff onto the end of that to make it accessible. It's going to be a nightmare, it's going to be a really long process, it's going to really annoy you because it's going to feel like you're tearing apart what you've already built and trying to wedge things in. But if you design it and build it with this stuff in mind from the start, it's actually going to make loads more sense. And usually what I find is it actually makes my work a bit tidier and a bit more sensible, because I'm not just taking the quickest, fastest way to do something. I have to actually plan it out and plan, okay, like if I'm doing a drag and drop thing, I have to think about, well, what is the actual experience, like the core concept of what people are doing here, and build it from that and add the fancy JavaScript and the fancy CSS on afterwards to make it nice. So you're basically making it make the very basic thing, like it's that sort of, basic, this does the thing, it picks one out of the three, it's a radio button, okay, that's fine. And then later you come back and go, okay, so it's like that progressive enhancement. You go, okay, so now we can make it look pretty, and now we can add JavaScript effects, and now we can make it work on mobile as well. All those sort of things. So this is a nice gif of what happens when you try and stick accessibility on after the fact. Of when you open your button and then immediately hit stairs. Basically that concept of, if you're trying to stick it on afterwards, partly you're just going to miss bits. So you're going to be like, oh, it's really accessible because you can get to the button to get into our sign up page. But then our sign up page isn't accessible because nobody gets the errors. The errors aren't announced on a screen reader, or that just goes bright red and doesn't say anything. So yeah, build it in from the start. Make sure that your core components have those features. And is it worth it? Well, I would like to say yes, obviously. That's kind of why I'm here. Partly because the first point, people will only try your product once. If it's horrible, if it's difficult to use, if it's confusing, they're not going to come back, realistically. I mean, it's very rare that you're the only person in the world that has that particular service or that particular website. And if yours isn't accessible and someone else's is, they're going to pick that one every time. And as you saw from the numbers at the start, that's a big portion of people that you could just be immediately turning away because you just thought it takes too much extra time to type these up slightly differently or build them, design them differently. Also, yeah, the second point, tech is such a big part of our lives. Obviously, 10, 20 years ago, there wasn't a whole big portion of people that were using screen readers or assistive devices or anything else. But, my granddad is almost entirely blind, and he still buys a smartphone every 6 months before giving it back because he realises he can't use it. So it's getting more and more essential to be able to interact with these websites and these devices every single day. And it's only going to be more and more popular. And like we said, about 8% of children having some sort of disability, they're going to grow up and be a core part of your target market. And you don't really want to have them cut out before they've even hit the age to be in that range. And yeah, because nobody should be forced to have half an experience to go, well, there's that great site YouTube, but nobody ever put any captions on the video, so I just watch people moving around and then read the comments to guess what happened. You know, you don't want that for your website. You don't want people to go, well, it seems to be about this, but I couldn't really use it. Because why would they come back? Why would they become a customer? Yeah, so there's a bunch of tools and resources here that I've listed that if anyone wants to hit me up and get these slides, you can sort of come and find these. The alphabet of accessibility is the one I mentioned, 26 examples of types of disability, temporary and permanent. So it gives you an idea that there's even some like that you wouldn't think of, like a new mum like Joan holding twins. How much really flexibility does she have to browse? She's not sitting on a laptop while she's holding twins. She maybe has, you know, her phone in with one thumb that she's trying to get through everything. Things like that, you know. You don't want to make it that you need to have, you know, 2 fingers and be able to use your whole hand to navigate around a website, because not everyone is going to be able to do that. Yeah, so thanks. I don't know if anyone has any questions now or if there's much time, because I'm sure you're all ready to go and get a bit of a break and tea and coffee or whatever, but I'm also on Twitter and Slack and everywhere if you want to find me for questions afterwards, and I'll be hovering around here all day long. So yeah.
There is time for questions if anyone has any. What's the most complex accessibility issue you've came across?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so there was one particular that I had to build where basically we had this idea where somebody had to, like, it was like a little quiz. Somebody watched the video and then they had to do a little question on it afterwards. And what they did was, it was supposed to look like sort of a Twitter type social media thing, you know, pick which one of the answers is right and drag it over. But the way the designers had come up with it was you drag it from the 3 options into the right place, into the bit that looks like the Twitter type in bit or whatever. And they had just gone, right, drag it in. So obviously we were like, okay, that's fine. You know, there's loads of JavaScript everywhere that can do this. This is not a new challenge. But the company that this product was for had really, really strict accessibility requirements, including keyboard users and everything else. And obviously a keyboard user can't drag and drop. There's no functionality for that. So what basically we had to sit and do, and what I ended up sitting and doing, was mocking it all up in terms of thinking the very basics. So this, as I mentioned earlier, this user's picking one of 3. So realistically, the core functionality of this is radio buttons. It's you know, a basic survey, select one of these 3 things. So I had to build it out of that and then add everything else on top, so that, okay, if they select that radio button, then it jumps across. So, you know, some people will be able to see it, because again, not everyone who's using a screen reader is blind either, so you need to have that interaction on the screen anyway. So it was, if they navigate and use the keyboard, it jumps over into the right place. If they drag it, it selects the right radio button, things like that, and then built it in that way. Yep.
I'm just wondering, are there just like a few top errors when it comes to accessibility that you see websites making a lot?
Yeah, well, I guess the biggest one would be that thing I said, where they just think if you can tab to everything, or they try and add like tabbable indexes on things like text paragraphs, and it's like people don't. You're actually just making it worse. You're making it more confusing, because depending on what screen reader I use, I might have, you know, it might be like I use like Alt and C to hit every paragraph, and I use Alt and L to hit every link, things like that. So just adding tabs to everything actually just makes it so much more confusing, because there's a jumble of extra stuff that you're not trying to navigate to. And then one big thing is like people who put captions on images, but the captions are completely useless because they're referencing something that you can maybe see, or something that's related to other things, and they don't actually mean anything. So things like that. Also, one thing that's been a big discussion at the minute, actually, this is on a particular website, which is Twitter, and this 300 icons in the username thing, which some people, you might have seen people talking about. Basically, there has been a big Twitter thread and a big thing where if you have like, there's my name, and then there's like smiley face, heart, smiley face, sparkly heart, unicorn, whatever, your screen reader is going to be like, Claire, unicorn, smiley heart, small heart, unicorn, every time in every tweet that I tweet on your timeline. So it seems like, oh, my Twitter, that's really cute because I have all these icons, but actually it becomes a real pain for someone who's trying to listen to that, and there's a whole discussion between 7 people and they all have 17 icons after their like 2-character name. So yeah, things like that, or using like icons for letters the way some people do.
Is there like a single tool or DevTool add-on or linter or
Well, I guess it probably depends on your process. One thing that you actually don't even need to install is Chrome DevTools does a lot of accessibility issues, and I think the Firefox add-ons have a lot as well that's pre-built in. So there's a lot of stuff that your browser can automatically do, and all you literally have to do is hit run audit or run check or whatever, and it'll bring up loads. And the reason that these are also really good is that they don't just go, here's 17 errors. They say, here's 17 errors, and for every one, here's the link to the docs that explain why these are a problem and what you can do about it. I should go back to, So the Chrome lens is a really good one for people being able to see what it's like. Basically, you install this and you can select different types of experience that your other users might have. So you can simulate like color blindness, you can simulate tunnel vision, things like that, and it just gives you a bit of an idea of what the website looks like. And then the biggest other one is Pally, which is for automated testing, which if you have a testing pipeline at all is probably one of the most important ones to throw in from that perspective. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much. All right, guys. I don't have